starting at 3 p.m. Thank you, Earth Month, for those announcements from the Community Bulletin Board. Stay tuned for State of the Arts NYC with Savona Bailey-McClain coming up. It is now 5 p.m. Stay tuned.
Good evening. This is State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And tonight, our theme is Warhol. Everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. So tonight, we have joining us Lisanne Schuyler, who is a filmmaker for a new documentary that will be airing on HBO, August 7th, called Brillo Box. And then we will have Jessica Beck, who is the Milton Fine Curator at the Warhol Museum. So I would like to thank those ladies for joining us. And then in our second segment, we will be featuring two outstanding artists who are doing groundbreaking work at the Lincoln Center Festival. We will have Nanda Mohammad and Mohammad Alrefai, who are doing the play While I Was Waiting. So, ladies, let's kick off. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Jessica, are
thanks
you there?
for having me.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you both. I think this is wonderful, and the timing happens to be very, very good. I did not anticipate that there was a documentary being done on Warhol, but I was very interested in him because, just to let our listeners know, Andy Warhol did an interview with WBAI many, many years ago. And I discovered it on our Pacifica archive, and I thought, wow, that's kind of wonderful. I should build this whole, segment around Warhol. And then, just so both of you ladies know, I went to Pitt. And so I saw this connection because, I'm a University of Pittsburgh graduate, and he's from Pittsburgh, and I thought this was amazing. So we're going to start off a little bit with Jessica because I want to offer this sort of academic, background about Warhol. And I know because I lived in Pittsburgh, but I know that his upbringing in Pittsburgh, going to church with his mother, and stained glass was very important. In fact, almost every home in Pittsburgh, I think, has a piece of stained glass, either in the door or the window. But all of that influenced him. So, Jessica, why don't you tell us a little bit about, Warhol's early years in Pittsburgh and how that all impacted him?
Yeah, so as you had just said, Andy Warhol grew up and was born here in Pittsburgh and grew up in Pittsburgh. He didn't really come back after he made his big success in New York, but he was born in 1928, which is just around the Great Depression. So he was born in that sort of Depression era, and then went to Carnegie Tech, which is now Carnegie Mellon.
Really?
During this whole and this 1940s period, which would have all been about sort of social realism and figuration and painting. And so he went to school with people like Philip Pearlstein, who later became a very famous figurative painter, especially in the 1970s.
Okay.
But he did, spend a lot of time with his mother. He was the youngest of three boys, and he had sort of a sickly childhood. He had St. Vitus's dance as a child, and so there are many stories of him staying home over the summer months, writing away then to his favorite celebrities like Shirley Temple, and forming this very close bond with his mother, who was also very creative, was a very sort of creative draftsman. We have many drawings of Julia's actually in the collection.
Okay.
And she went up to New York with Warhol after Warhol started making a sort of handsome salary as an illustrator and lived with him for many years.
That part I didn't know. I didn't know that. She wanted him to settle down and have a wife and family. Yes, I am familiar.
Yeah, to have many babies. Actually, I think she's quoted as saying in an interview. But Warhol, like he did with many people in his life, either whether they were lovers or friends, with his mother, he put her to work. And so in that sort of commercial period in New York, he used all of her handwriting. So in his books that he made, 25 Cats Named Sam and One Blue Pussy, or In the Bottom of My Garden, all of these books that have cursive script in them. Wild Raspberries was a cookbook. That's actually Julia's handwriting that Warhol is using.
Well, you know what? That's kind of interesting because, you know, in New York, for now a number of years, they stopped teaching cursive writing in the schools. And many people have been quite upset about that. And I heard so much so that now they're going to reinstate cursive writing into the schools. And I owe my whole ability on, you know, writing cursively from my third grade teacher, because that's what you did. You waited until you were in the third grade and you were retaught how to print, you know, legibly, and then to do cursive writing. So people say, oh, you have such a great handwriting. I said, well, that's what you did. You learned that in school. I owe that to my third grade teacher. So then that makes sense, you know, that tradition, you know, you know, how me and Lisanne was talking about the garment district and about how people used to make things with their hands and clothing, but it's the same thing with the writing. I can see the correlation easily. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about Warhol is that he made a lecture set of Julia's alphabet, so he was able to copy her script. So he actually never wrote her script. He either had an assistant copy it with the lecture set, which would have been an ability basically to trace her handwriting, or have her actually transcribe text for drawing.
All right, that's a really good bit of information. So his mother was this great influence on him in developing, I guess, his own personal style. So I'm going to bring in Lisanne, because then her family was at a young age decided that they were going to collect art, and they collected Warhol. So tell us, Lisanne, a little bit about that.
So my parents started collecting art in the late 60s, early 70s, and they were very much into discovering what was new. And it's hard to imagine now, but at the time, Warhol was still considered a new artist. And my parents had different feelings. And what happened was they ended up buying a Brillo Box, which relates so nicely when we talk about the domestic space of Warhol and being so close to his mom, because almost everyone talks about, well, his mother had to have used Brillo. Of course, he grew up with that. It was the classic post-war, cleaning product. And I think that my mother in particular really related to that Brillo Box. It was this domestic item. You could almost tell right away it was coming from something personal with Warhol. And my father had different feelings about it. He eventually sold it. And the film then tracks what happened to the box and how weaving together the story of this box, but also how Warhol's stature grew, and how all the different factors that contributed to our understanding of both the Brillo Box and Andy.
And you know what, we were talking earlier, Lisanne and I, and I'm sure, Jessica, you can relate to this too. It's just that his sense of color was interesting. And particularly even with his graphic work, that sense of color, because the Brillo Box is really just red and white, with maybe a little bit of blue.
He made a whole, when he first debuted the Brillo Boxes, they were actually part of a whole series of called supermarket boxes. And so you had Del Monte peaches, you had Heinz, you had Campbell's tomato juice, and they were all designed as a very colorful piece. And I often asked, what was it? Because the box we had was this yellow 3 cents off Brillo Box. He only made a few of them, so they were very rare, and most people thought of the white ones.
Right.
And to the point that when we would see the yellow one in our family album, we were like, is it really a Warhol? We only know the white. But a lot of people, because that's what you saw everywhere, but he made those yellows, and I think it was part of his love of color, just kind of having that splash of yellow and all the different colors and mid-century graphics from all the different boxes. And when he first presented them all together at the Stable Gallery in 1964, it was this as if you walked into the back room of a supermarket.
Right.
And perfectly Warholian in the sense that, with Warhol, there's always those two sides. So is he sending up the art market, and putting in grocery products in this fancy, beautiful gallery, or is he sending up, our love of consumer products by elevating them to, art status? And there's all those sort of double meanings with that installation.
I think it's a mix. Jessica, jump in, because his love of stained glass, I think, may have an impact. Why don't you chime in?
Well, I would just say that, I've seen the photographs of the Stable Gallery opening, and I think the way that the boxes were installed some of them blocked a doorway, I think, right? There was like the sense that you had to really navigate these high stacks of the Brillo boxes. So I think some of his practice, there's a lot of irony in there about high art value. So thinking of minimalist sculpture, which starts to make its debut at this period too, and starts to evolve more prominently by the 70s. But you think of minimalist sculpture being you have to navigate it, or you have to navigate these sculptures, or they have a relationship to the body from the viewer in some way. So Warhol's being quite cheeky with this reference back to a low status or mundane status of a back storage room of a grocery store, but he's also sort of engaging these high art practices of navigating contemporary sculpture in sort of the white cube.
Wow.
So he does the same thing. He does the same thing with his painting from this period. If you think of the dance diagram paintings, which were 1961 and 1962, they were originally installed on the floor. So there's, again, an idea of encountering objects and canvases almost like sculpture, and then also thinking about action painting, making a comment back to Jackson Pollock, who famously painted on the floor. So there's a lot of irony involved in this, and so Warhol's using those mechanics of pop, basically, which inherently had a sense of irony. It manifests into the idea of what pop art was at this moment.
Wow, now that's very interesting. You know what's really fascinating from both of you? Warhol was far more complex than a lot of people realize, and there was like so many layers of him, and you really had to probe, because if you don't probe, you won't get to the meat of it all, because he was trying to say a variety of things on multiple levels, and if you didn't take the time, you would miss out on something really wonderful. I didn't even think about that at all, how he was really trying to focus on the politics, really, of high art versus low art. And we're still talking about that to this day. And how do you make art accessible to the public? How do you engage? Because now that you said this, bringing in Lisanne, it seems like it makes sense why he used the household products, because it was about making art accessible. Would you say that might be a possibility?
I mean, absolutely. I think you take this recognizable product and immediately you just relate to it. You relate to it in a very basic, very primal way. Then you take that object and you put it out of context. You put it in the way Jessica just described.
Right.
The meanings start changing.
Yes.
And I think part of part of this with Warhol is like we're still debating this. We're still thinking about all the different levels, and everything he said and did and made has multiple levels. All those phrases, they all mean have lots of different meanings and permutations that grow with us and grow as our culture changes. We revisit it.
Yeah,
think about it. I mean, when he said 15, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. That meant one thing, when he said it. Now with social media and all the permutations, which he was a pioneer of in a sense with his television access, the first iteration of YouTube, what you call it. Now these things mean new things to us. And so we keep going back to Warhol, and this kind of prophetic vision he had.
Yes. What do you have to say about that, Jessica? You want to add some more?
Yeah. I mean, I would just say that, the whole reason that we still talk about him is because there's something very special about the work, and we wouldn't be talking about it if it was all just a ploy for sort of funny boxes that look like real Brillo boxes. They're really sophisticated. So they take the Duchampian idea of the ready-made and it plays with it. So instead of having the actual Brillo box, the cardboard box from the grocery store, they're made by a carpenter, wooden hollow boxes that he then hand painted and hand stenciled in sort of an assembly line fashion in his studio. So it's the same way with a lot of his practice. It has very sophisticated ideas about high art values, but he's using very common imagery, but imagery that taps into a very American identity. This is why we still look at the Brillo box. I didn't grow up with Brillo boxes, but I can still look at that and know it as a very American product or an American symbol, in the same way that I didn't grow up with Marilyn Monroe, but I can still look at her as this beauty icon of the silver screen. And goes again back to his commercial roots of being able to select these images that live on in a way that's pretty amazing. You know, I mean, you can look back at all of these works from the early 60s and they still read as very, very contemporary, and that's unusual.
Yes, yes. Well, I did grow up with the Brillo Box, so I can speak on that a little bit. But what I also think, when you guys were talking about, you know, the high art versus low art, I'm thinking about his background in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh when, not so much growing up, but went to college there. It was still a steel town, a working class city where people in generations were working those mills. And I'm starting to think that maybe he was trying to say something about that too, you know, about, you know, America. Wouldn't you agree that he might be saying that too?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, a lot of the products that he brings into his work, you know, the Coca-Cola, the Campbell soup, all of that work from the very early 60s, is all, you know, they're symbols of America consumerism and this sort of boom of American consumerism after World War II, and right in the middle of the 1950s period of a whole rise of teenage culture and celebrity culture and media, and that's all connected to this consumerist culture that was changing. So instead of having two product options at the grocery store, you now have a plethora of options for very basic products. So that was all new, and changing.
And Lisanne, talk about the computer art, because he was ahead of his time, and he was doing computer art as well.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it recently came out that as we know, he's an artist who worked in every possible medium that was available, and he even was in the 80s taking pictures, digitizing them, or there was some footage discovered of him working with Debbie Harry, and that footage actually appears briefly in our film. Okay, and it just goes to show you that he just was always finding new ways to, use the medium to kind of get at these questions and to work with this high and low idea. I mean, I mean, what a perfect example! Like digital technology, and you look at digital art, you're like, what is right? And that he already was doing that.
I was very fascinated about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is funny that you're talking about this, only because on Monday we're going to be installing an Amiga computer with Warhol's digital images on them, because it was actually in 2014 here at the Andy Warhol Museum that Corey Archangel, a contemporary artist, digital artist, was here doing an exhibition or participating in an exhibition, and he worked with CMU, Carnegie Mellon University, and our archive and the Museum of Art to extract these images, which were sort of frozen on obsolete hard drives in the collection in our archives. Because, we have the discs.
So he is really relevant.
So it wasn't in the 80s that Commodore, the computer, the company that launched this at-home version of a computer, the Amiga, signed Warhol as a brand ambassador. So he was at their launch with Debbie Harry, as you're mentioning, on stage to make it seem accessible, or a machine that could be used for art making. And he made a series of drawings, including his flowers, a Campbell soup, a self-portrait, Debbie Harry, and then the birth of Venus.
Yes. Well, now let's dovetail a little bit, Lisanne, about the Brillo Box and how it moved and became a part of a global market where the initial value, which was $200, your parents bought it for $1,000, but it's sold at Christie's for over $3 million. Tell us a little bit about that.
Right. Absolutely. So in 2010, I learned that the little Brillo box that my family once owned and put me on top of as a baby, because it was treated like furniture, which is how a lot of people treated their Brillo boxes at the time. Put a little plexiglass on it, a cigarette ashtray, you're done, And this picture of this Brillo box was just in our family album, and I always wondered, what happened to it. And so once it came up to sale at Christie's, I was able to go back and kind of figure out the records, and found that it sold, had been to auction several times at Christie's. It had been to some very prominent collectors, including Charles Saatchi and the late Robert Shapazian, who was the founding director of the Gagosian Gallery in LA. And so the film is really looking at these just different ways value is created, because and it's looking at Warhol's life also, in the sense that, at the time that he died, he was not as appreciated as he is now, which is just boggles the mind, honestly. But how, as collectors and museum people started to go, wait a second, there's much more to this than we first thought. And they start revisiting Warhol, in these different eras. And so the film looks at how the value climbs and climbs. And also that very personal relationship between an artist and the collector and the artist. Everyone looks at a work of art and sees something completely different. And a collector does put an imprint on a work. And in the film, my dad tells a story about getting the work signed in the 60s. At the time, Warhol didn't often sign things. And when my father actually asked Ivan Karp, the gallerist who helped found, early supporter of Warhol, he said, do you think you could get Andy to sign it? And everyone was laughing at my dad. They're like, are you kidding? This is like extremely uncool. Everyone knows it's a Warhol. And my dad was like, I was embarrassed and I know I seemed like a cretin, but I insisted on the signature.
Okay.
Turns out, having that signature
made a
changed the meaning of that one particular box. So when it went up to sale at Christie's, it had passed through the hands of Charles Saatchi, Shapazian. It had that little signature. Warhol's, there was starting in the late 90s, and I think also pushed even further when the PBS documentary by Rick Burns came out. And again, this new appreciation of Warhol. So the market for Andy Warhol starts to climb, really escalate. And then this very rare work comes into the market with the signature, with this amazing provenance. And, the story
no,
goes
this
from
is
there.
good because I'm sure you can identify, Jessica, that when it comes to collecting, it really should be this personal relationship between the collector and the artist. You want to, and just to let you know, I curate art, Jessica, so I do understand that you should encourage collectors to grow with that artist so that they can experiment. And that's one of the things I see with Warhol. He did a lot of experimentation. So as people were collecting and he was selling works, it afforded him not just the time but the resources to experiment. And for a lot of artists, they never get that opportunity, and that's what makes the difference between a great artist and someone who might be, average, and that is the confidence that they're getting from their base of supporters and collectors so that they can grow. Wouldn't you say that is true?
Yeah. And I think the unique thing about Warhol too is that he blurred so much between his everyday life and then his art practice. So it's almost like his life almost turned out in a way to be a certain amount. You could argue almost a performance in a way, in the way that he archived and photographed and diaried and journaled and documented. It's actually maddening.
Okay.
Gives you guys a lot of work.
He was constantly moving, wasn't he?
Yeah. So you have the diaries, you have the archives here, his time capsules. We have 610 boxes that make up the time capsules alone, and in each one of those can be hundreds and hundreds of objects. So it's hundreds of thousands of objects in our archived collection. And then the Polaroids, he took 35 millimeter photographs, he took video diaries, he tape recorded phone conversations and party conversations. So it goes on and on, the ways that he turned so much of his daily existence into a form of art practice.
Okay, and there goes, our theme, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. I think he took that to heart, wouldn't you say?
Well, I think the thing that resonates so strongly today is now how everyone sort of documents their daily life through Instagram or Twitter post or a Facebook post, or we're sort of publicly documenting and sharing it.
Yeah. And Lisanne, tell us now, when will your documentary premiere on HBO?
Oh, thank you. So Brillo Box 3 Cents Off will premiere exclusively on HBO August 7th. After it debuts, it will be available on HBO Go, HBO Now. And it also tells, besides the story of the value, it also flips it and talks about that very personal way we engage with art, engaged with Warhol. Features a lot of great archival elements from the Warhol collection. So all that work the Warhol Museum does, thank you. And we also filmed quite a bit at the Warhol Museum, too. And it features an interview with the former director, Eric Scheiner. He talks a little bit about Warhol's practice and making those Brillo boxes, and
Okay.
you know, and I think when I think about that phrase, you know, when making the film, I thought about that phrase, you know, everyone will be famous. You know, that meant one thing. Having made the film, I find it very poignant because I when I started making the film, I didn't realize how underappreciated Warhol was at one point. Like I remember growing up with him, and you know, growing up in New York in the 80s, he was just this kind of cool figure. You know, you'd see him at nightclubs, and as kids, we'd like want to go talk to him or get an interview magazine, and you know, or the Factory, and cool people went to the Factory, you know. But I didn't grow up with that sense of him as a really important, you know, artist. And then in the late 2000s, when I started making, you know, when that box came up to sale, it was like, oh, of course, Warhol's really important. We've had all these museum retrospectives and, you know, and all these things. But now I just think of it like, you know, his time. Just like the Basquiat sale, we were talking about that earlier, that I think things come around and everyone has their time, and artists have to stay.
I think what makes him interesting, as well as other great artists, is that they were ahead of their time.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so he could see a little bit of the future that we could not see, and that it has an importance. It's supposed to make a statement, and you may not have understood the statement then because we needed to evolve more, but as we have now, we can better appreciate him. Well, I want to thank you, ladies, so very, very much for joining. This was really wonderful. I am so happy that we were able to get the two of you onto the show and to talk about Warhol. I'm very pleased. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, and we hope to talk to you ladies again soon.
Thank you, Savona.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can't wait to see the documentary.
I can't wait for you to see it.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And we just concluded our first segment where we talked about Warhol. And we had joining us Lisanne Schuyler, who's the documentary filmmaker for Brillo Box, 3 cents off. And we had the Milton Fine Curator from the Warhol Museum with us, and that's Jessica Beck. And we had a great conversation about the impact of Warhol of today and how he is still impacting the art market. I also want to give a shout out and thanks to the Warhol Museum for helping me to arrange this, as well as HBO. HBO was fantastic, and their publicity team for making sure that we got Lisanne, as well as Christy. And Christy's was very, very helpful in making sure. Thank you, Rebecca, for making sure that we had Lisanne onto the show. Now we are about to enter our next segment, and our next segment is based on the Lincoln Center Festival. And the Lincoln Center Festival during the summer is really a spectacular international festival. And I was reviewing all of the different performances that they were presenting and they're going to showcase, and I was quite taken back by While I Was Waiting. And While I Was Waiting really deals with a very timely subject matter, and that is the warfare and the tribulations in Syria. And I thought it was important because we need to understand from the people's perspective of Syria what it all means and how it's impacting them, how we could be supportive, how we can be non-judgmental and just listen and hear what people are saying. And so we have two of the actors who are in that production. We have Nanda Mohammad and Mohammad Alrefai. Alrefai, who are here courtesy of Lincoln Center. So I just wanted to say welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And so why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about the production? Go ahead, Nanda.
The production is, as you said, While I Was Waiting, written by Mohammad Al-Attar, directed by Omar Abu Sada. We are six actors. We have scenographer, light designer, technical directors. All of us are Syrians. Each one lives in different country.
Okay.
We started working on the production almost 1 year and a half.
Wow.
For 2 months in Marseille, France. We did all our rehearsals there. It was really so complicated to do this production since the first time till now, as you maybe know. Each time we have many difficulties and many starting to make the reunion for the group while we are waiting for that. It was really so hard to do it, but we were really glad that we did it at the end, and we made a long tour in France, Switzerland, Germany, Belgium,
many places.
Yeah, and now here with you in New York.
Oh, this is fantastic. So, Mohammad, jump in as well. How does it feel to be a part of a cast that's telling a very, interesting and very sensitive subject?
Yeah, it is. Actually, it's really, really sensitive, especially what we are talking about during the play. For me, it's... I'm glad to be part of this group and of this team. And also, at first, it was difficult to me.
Okay.
Because I am used to acting in Syria.
Okay.
So after that, when we start the rehearsal, as Nanda said, in Marseille, in France. So it was my first time working with all of the team. So it was, for me, it's a new style of acting.
Okay.
So it was something new, something very strange for me. So at first I had lots of difficulties. And then after 1 month of rehearsal, I started being better. And I started catching everything.
Okay. But I like what you were saying. This was like a whole new experience.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is this, for both of you, the first time you're in New York?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So that's interesting,
I think
too.
for most of the group, it would be the first time in New York.
Okay. Well, welcome to New York.
Thank
I
you.
mean, we have such a diverse population here in New York City with people from... I forgot there is an official count. I know it's at least a couple of hundred different people from like 200 different countries at least, and I forgot the dozens of languages that are spoken here. And it has changed over the decades too, where there's a lot of fusion that's going on when it comes to food and when it comes to drinks, and so therefore people are starting to appreciate all these different nuances across different cultures. So welcome to New York. So how did you get involved with the Lincoln Center Festival? How did they select you?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I think Lincoln Center contact it shows the. I'm not sure who saw or when they saw the show, but I know that they invited the show few months ago, and it was a very long and difficult process for them and for us to be here, because as you know now, this period, for sure, for a Syrian group to come here and to be able to get the visa, it was really so complicated. And I think without the big effort of everybody in Lincoln Center, it would be quite impossible to come here.
You wanted to say something?
Actually,
Go ahead.
They have worked hard to let us be able to come here.
Okay.
They really worked hard.
Okay. I just have to say how saddened I am for such, policies, because, it caters to, just, raw fears. And I personally feel that if you really want to, overcome, these divides, you have to allow people to communicate and talk and hear. And I think that's why I was very, interested in your production, because the whole production, correct, is in Arabic, correct, with English subtitles.
Exactly.
So you really get an immersive experience when they see the production, correct?
And also because I think it would be interesting to perform here exactly to maybe let the people hear, as you said, or to see another perspective, and because we tried through the whole process of the work to say what we are, what we really feel and think, and without the whole cliches about the situation, which is after all complicated, but through a human story, through a family story. Each one in the family has his own perspective, and you can see through the play how much the Syrian people now are lost in a way, and how much they are, or we are, looking for a future, struggling with the reality, and it would, I think it would be interesting for the people now to hear each other more.
Yes, I agree. I think if you start from where you guys have, dealing with family, it's easier to identify, because then you can see it in your own family. You know how we squabble in our own families, how we disagree in our own families. But if you're seeing this in another family, you think, well, that looks a little bit like my family. And then that way you can do just what you're doing now, laughing, because you can identify with it.
Actually, it was funny because many times we had spectators who came to us and said, well, we don't have war, we don't deal with your problems, but actually we had a lot of moments exactly like you.
Moments,
And so wouldn't you agree, Mohammad, it just feels like...
Yeah, actually, I agree with Nanda, and also I want to say something. People also, when they are looking to the news, hearing about Syria, they just hear numbers of people. So when you saw this play, you can find that it's not just numbers. They are people, they love, they feel, they do many things. It's not just numbers.
It's human stories.
It is, exactly.
And I think that's really, important, because right now there's so much fear all over the globe. And I think what it is, not trying to, side with any, one particular group, but I think on multiple levels, people are just trying to figure out how they can be heard. And I don't condone violence whatsoever. But what I think is important is that, folks get that opportunity to just share what they're feeling, whether you agree with it or not, but just hear what they have to say. And then maybe that will offer, some peace, because I think that's what we all want. We want to get along and see this world as a peaceful place.
I agree, but I think also for me the most important thing is to let the people understand that they are responsible too.
Okay,
and
that's fair.
And everybody, I mean, not I don't mean here or there. We are all responsible for anything happening now in the world, and not only the war in Syria or whenever it
could be climate change.
Yeah, exactly. We are all responsible, and when we really don't see it, and we we deal without it as if it's far away from us,
Right.
as if we don't really it doesn't affect us. So
Right.
it would be
To be absent.
that would be the
I
disaster.
understand, like brushing it underneath.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't want to deal with it. I don't have to touch
it will come to you
Yes.
at the end in
Yes.
a way.
You're
And
right.
that's the problem.
Yes, I agree that eventually we all have to deal with these issues. If we don't deal with these issues, eventually it will come to our doorstep. I feel that strongly because I'm a big advocate for telling the truth. If you tell the truth, you can deal with things. If you don't deal with the truth, eventually you're going to create a bad situation. It's almost going to be like a form of cancer, and then it gets out of control, and then you cannot contain it. You can't reduce it. You can't, resolve it. It just becomes this horrible thing that you can't manage anymore. So I agree with you that we do need to start taking some responsibility. All of us, what we say, what we do. What do you want people to feel when they finish seeing the production? Any particular conclusions, or maybe nothing at all?
Actually, I think the most important thing is to let people know that we are human like you.
Okay.
We are facing a special case. If you are facing the same case, you will be like us.
Okay.
So we are not so far from you, or not so far from your situation. I think that is the most important thing.
I can't imagine actually what the. I mean, for me, I've never expected anything from the people after the. I deal with this production as any other production I do.
Okay.
I try to deal with it like this, to be as professional as I can, because when you deal with a sensitive issue like this play, it would be sometimes very complicated to stay connected with you. Sometimes you resist to be in it. So because it's so close to you and because it's so sensitive. So I try all the time to not to expect anything from the people, not to ask them to go out from the theater with any thoughts or feelings. But I think the only thing I would be happy if it would be happen is to really connect with them.
Okay. So, because what you're saying is important too. You're both actors, and really you're also thinking about your careers, and you want to do just the best possible job you can do. And sometimes when you're doing certain types of work, the subject can, overshadow the fact that you're just trying to be very good actors. And so you don't want that to be the only thing that people are focusing on.
Yeah.
And sometimes you may say it's a very good work only because it's dealing with a sensitive issue, and for me that's unacceptable. I appreciate art if it's good or not, even if it's about the word, the table, the sex, anything.
Yes.
So I try all the time to deal with it as any other thing, even if it's really difficult.
Right. No, because that's an issue in this country where we have been grappling with diversity when it comes to theater or when it comes to television or film. And how do you actually help artists of color or more women to get those great roles? And it should be because they're good actors.
Exactly.
It shouldn't just always be because then you typecast people and you put them in a box, and then they don't see your humanity. They only see this subject or this cause.
It's the same problem all over the world, unfortunately. This is the main problem all over the world. Yeah.
But no, we're talking about it now, so we are solving it. We're saying
exactly.
that you want to be seen for actors as well and as human beings as well, and not just this subject matter that can cloud everything for you.
Yeah, because unfortunately, and also fortunately, if you can see now, after the Syrian war or all the Arab rising in the Arab world, the people in Europe and USA and all over the world are more interested to hear and to see the Arabic arts as if we didn't have anything before.
Right.
For me, sometimes I feel like, okay, it's good. It's really good that you are caring now about the Arabic arts, but it's really important to know that there was a lot of things before the war.
I think it's because a lot of people don't get to travel as much as they should.
Yeah.
And so therefore they don't come in contact with the culture. The other thing is, and something I've said for a long time just in my own personal life, that unless you make friends with other people, you'll never get to experience those cultures. I remember when I was a little girl, one of my friends in 7th grade was Japanese. So I would visit her and she would introduce me to Japanese food. I had octopus and seaweed, and I didn't necessarily like everything, but the point was it was the sharing that was going on. You're sharing your culture, you're sharing your background and your foods. So this is good, and I'm glad we talked about it, because even that's a sensitive issue. How do you go past what you see and then look at the person behind what you think you know? So all of this is very good. And I'm very, happy that Lincoln Center, bringing in Lincoln Center, chose to be brave.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it's brave in these political climates right now to say we're going to push forward to make this happen. And that's important. And that's revolutionary in and of itself, too.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, we're getting ready to wrap up this segment, but I want to thank you so much that you were able to join me. I took a chance. I pushed. I want to thank Lincoln Center very, very much, including Erica, who is the general manager, the total publicity team, and also one of our producers here, Jeannie Hopper, who made the introduction for me so that we could have you here on our show. Thank you so much. Very, very much.
Thank you, and I hope you can come in the
I'm going to try to get there.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're
thank
more
you.
than welcome.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye. And we are back with State of the Arts NYC, where we cover art. And we just had on our show two very, very lovely people. They are a part of the production While I Was Waiting. And that production is being shown at the Lincoln Center Festival this year. And that festival is showing a number of international productions. And this one is about a real Syrian family who is dealing with the multiple conflicts in that country, and therefore they're sharing just an ordinary family story. And then that way we can understand, the various dynamics that are going on in that family and also in other families in Syria, and maybe look at that conflict very, very differently. So I just want to thank them and Lincoln Center for doing that. And so we're getting ready to wrap up our show this week, but I want to let everyone know that next week, WBAI, is going to start their summer fun drive. And so we are going to be promoting some very special curated archival interviews, one of which will be Warhol, when Warhol was actually here at WBAI interviewing with hosts and talking about his art. I think this is fabulous that we can fast forward all of these years and then hear from the artist himself and still be as fascinated with him today as when he first talked with us many, many decades ago. We are very excited about that. We hope you will listen. We'll send more information on our website, stateoftheartsnyc.wordpress.com. You can also check us out on Twitter and on Facebook, where we've also posted a lot of images from the Warhol Museum, from Brillo Box, as well as the production that's going to be presented here in New York City while I was waiting. So we just want you to be all excited about what we're doing and how we're making a difference here in New York City, because we're different from a lot of radio stations. We have a salon style, and we want you to get a behind the scenes sort of feel of what it really takes and all of the people that make the productions that you might see or hear about in New York City possible. We're also very supportive of the number of industries, creative industries. We've been working with manufacturers in the garment district, and we've been working with a lot of dancer choreographers who are developing new works. We have been dealing with lots of museums like the Whitney Museum that just kicked off another new exhibition with a Brazilian artist. All of this so that our audience throughout the tri-state area can really appreciate the arts up close and real. So with that said, we want to wish you all a great week. Enjoy your summer, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
I'm Jesse Lent with a WBAI Resistance Calendar. On Thursday, July 13th, the group People's Power Assemblies is holding a demonstration entitled Fists Up, Fight Back for Sandra Bland in remembrance of Bland, an African-American woman found hanged in her Texas jail cell 3 days after being arrested in 2015 after reportedly being pulled over for a routine traffic stop. The demonstration will begin at 6:30 p.m. on the corner of Flatbush and Nostrand Avenues in Brooklyn. We're taking the streets again in our community for Sandra Bland and all the black women and girls we've lost to state violence, organizers say. Not only are we not tired, we have renewed energy to bring the spirit of Sandra Bland. You can get more information at facebook.com/People's Power Assemblies. That same day, Thursday, July 13th, starting at noon, we'll kick off 3 days of women's rights or human rights demonstrations at Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, New Jersey. The protests are scheduled to coincide with the last 3 days of the U.S. Women's Open Golf Tournament taking place at the President's Club. In an official statement, organizers encourage potential participants to, quote, join New Jersey Working Families Alliance, Communication Workers of America, and activists from the tri-state area to speak out against the misogynist-in-chief, from his own lips, a sexual predator. He and his administration are attempting to turn back the clock on women's rights to comprehensive affordable health care, freedom of reproductive choice, pay parity, and workplace equality. The statement continues, Trump National Golf Club is one of several examples worldwide where he and his family have used the presidency to advance the Trump brand and fatten their financial empire. To learn more about the 3 days of protest at Trump National Golf Club Bedminster, email wedon'twant45@gmail.com. That's wedon'twant and the number 45 @gmail.com. Then on Saturday, July 15th at 4 p.m., the group Refuse Fascism is holding a Trump and Pence Must Go rally at Trump Tower at 725 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. The Trump-Pence regime has already done tremendous damage, reads an official Refuse Fascism statement on the protest. They must be stopped before it is too late. The Trump-Pence regime is ramping up harsh repressive measures against immigrants, inner-city youth, and against the right to dissent. They're pushing a budget and a healthcare plan of starvation, disease, impoverishment, and hatred of women. They are ratcheting up the destruction of our planet. We can't let this happen. We must seize on this struggle at the top to break through with our demand. The Trump-Pence regime is illegitimate because it is fascist, and all of us must join in the struggle to driving it from power. Find out more by calling 646-851-6785 or by sending an email to nyc@refusefascism.org. And on Wednesday, July 19th at 7 p.m., the group Indivisible Nation BK, or INBK, will hold a general meeting at the Brooklyn Society for Ethical Culture at 53 Prospect Park West in Brooklyn. According to INBK members, the event will be an opportunity for attendees to, quote, hear what we've been up to, brainstorm future actions, and get to know some fellow resistors. You can learn more at indivisiblenationbk.org or by emailing oneindivisiblenation@gmail.com. That's the WBAI Resistance Calendar for the week ending Saturday, July 15th. I'm Jesse Lett.
This is the ghost of Ronald Reagan with a serious message. If you think I was evil, you ain't seen nothing yet. Yes, I admit I did a lot of bad things when I was in charge, and I paid a heavy price. I mean, it's hot down here. During my reign, WBAI was in my face constantly. But that was then, and this is now. Now, you're dealing with a much more dangerous threat. Donald Trump is totally out of control. He's vindictive, unstable, and wears jackboots. Bad combo. I firmly believe the only outlet with the courage, integrity, and talent to take this man on is WBAI. The rest of the media is bought and paid for. So I urge you to keep listening and supporting WBAI, because it's going to be hell on earth.
Hi, my name is Michael G. Haskins, and I'm one of the hosts of The Morning Show, which airs Monday through Friday, 6 to 8 a.m. on this station. WBAI is listener-supported, commercial-free, resistance radio, challenging norms and defying them. Let's break down what that means. It means that no clandestine corporate entity tells me how to do my show. You better believe that. It means that you, the listener, and the diverse WBAI community have a voice, which reverberates across the tri-state area. You drive this station, so fuel us. Donate by visiting give2wbai.org or pledge right now from your smartphone by texting the letters WBAI to 41444. And thank you for your support.
Creative Unity Collective, alternating Friday nights, midnight, WBAI 99.5 FM in New York.
Once you change your philosophy, you change your thought pattern. Once you change your thought pattern, you change your attitude. Once you change your attitude, it changes your behavior pattern. And then you go on into some action.
Once upon a time when we were colored, stolen from the mother. 400 years later, Mr. Charlie's on some other. Take this as an affirmative act to slap back the whack. Catch brothers, sisters who are falling through the cracks. Creativity and unity, the keys to maintain our humanity and our sanity. No vanity, materialism, big willy crap. Just progressive elevation. Can I get a soul clap? Keep it going on. CUC, keep it going on.
Imhotep Gary Bird inviting you to join us for Radio GBE, the Global Black Experience and the Global Beat Experience, where the message is in the music. Friday nights, 6 to 8 p.m. Join us for all the features, interviews, guest coverage, and the music mix you've come to expect. And, of course, the things that light up your Friday night here in New York City and across the country and right through the diaspora. Pass the word. Bird is flying high in the New York sky with Radio GBE, Radio in the Key of Life. Friday nights, 6 to 8 p.m., right here on WBAI 99.5 FM and WBAI.org.
And once again, this is WBAI New York 99.5 FM and WBAI.org on the web. This is a listener-sponsored community radio station providing you a Pacifica state of mind since 1960. And the previous program was State of the Arts NYC, hosted and produced by Savona Bailey-McClain, heard Fridays starting at 5 p.m. Stay tuned for Radio GBE with Imhotep Gary Bird coming up. And once again, just wanted to let people know that we are about to approach yet another fundraiser, the Summer Fund Drive starting this Monday. So I just wanted to let people know again, and as you know, you're well aware of our